Okay. All right. Today we are talking about maintaining presence. And again, I thank you all for taking out the time today morning to be here. My name is Neha Indoria. I'm an executive coach, a strategic consultant, and an entrepreneur. And this little video that just played out right here is probably one of the first lessons that I learned from Jaya, which was about the fact that when you are in a session with a coach, when you are in a session as a coach, your thoughts are almost like a clear glass of water. Any feelings, any emotions, any external stimuli that comes in is going to muddle that water and it will never go back. So clear water is a concept that has stayed with me for a long while now, for the past 1 year. And maintaining presence, to my mind, is also the core of being a clear glass of water, a clear vessel for taking in whatever it is that our clients would like to talk to us about. I would also like to just thank Abhyudaya and specifically Jaya for giving me this opportunity to speak about maintaining presence. And now let's get started. Before I get started, the last thing that I would like to request to all of you is let's try and keep this little session interactive. We'll keep it tight. I intend to keep it around 45 to 50 minutes, but I would invite you guys to participate once in a while, and it'll be great if you could. And on that note, let's just play a little game to see how present all of us are today.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in a master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
Did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away. It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
So I would just like to ask the question to everybody. How observant were you? Did you notice any changes in the scene? And you can just put in your comments in the chat box. Let's just take 30 seconds to do that. If you have any comments in the chat, please do put them in the chat box. Yeah, it is a tough one, which is why. Okay. So to tell you guys, to give you guys a little bit of the answer, there were 21 changes in all.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
So this was just a little fun reminder to, one, of course, see if any of you have been present, and of course, remind ourselves, in the words of Eckhart Tolle, that wherever you are, be there totally, which is what maintaining presence in today's conversation is all about. just to take a quick check of what all we will be discussing today, we will talk about the importance of core competencies according to the ICF framework. We will talk about where competency 5 sits in relation to the other competencies. We will go deeper into competency 5, that is maintaining presence, to understand how it works. We will go through a couple of examples of what presence could look like and what it could not look like. Then we'll spend some time, pardon my typo here, but then we'll spend some time talking about how we can use this as a tool to cultivate presence in clients. And we will take a brief overview of what the competency 5 looks through different levels in ICF, the ACC, the PCC, and the MCC. So the importance of core competencies, other than the fact that it allows us a framework on which to function on, it gives structure and process to those who are new to the system. So I will give you my example. When I started in my coaching journey last year, I had come from a very different work scenario, and I wasn't really aware of what coaching is or how it can help. And this framework really helped me understand where I lack skills and how I can improve them. It worked as a set of guidelines. And according to ICF, the competencies outline essential skills and behavior that distinguish effective coaches. They provide a framework for ethical practice. It also gives you a framework for continuous improvement, because as we go through levels in our journey, the requirement for each competency becomes harder or becomes more specific on what you're assessed on, and therefore it becomes that much more critical for us to understand the competencies very, very clearly. And as we get better in our competencies, it is elevating the effectiveness that we can bring to the coaching process. It fosters a client's trust, and that automatically means that we can get more meaningful outcomes. Embracing or embodying the ICF core competencies is essential for cultivating excellence and credibility in the coaching profession. If we were to look at competency 5 in relation to other competencies, as it has been my understanding from what I have sort of learned or understood of maintaining presence, I would like to invite your views on this thought that actually maintains presence sits at the core of all the other competencies and is the one that the lack of which will ensure that you are, from an assessment point of view, perhaps creating areas of improvement in other competencies as well. By that, what I mean is that if you look at, if you were to think of it competency-wise, other than the obvious requirements of an ethical choice or an ethical practice, if you're not completely present for your client while you're being a coach, there is an ethical dilemma there that arises. One cannot really embody a coaching mindset if one decides not to continue to stay present. And staying curious is one of the key terms in the definition of a coaching mindset. So that is why it adds that much more value. How, our presence as a coach allows us to contract effectively, and you cannot have your ability to recontract or divert the conversation towards the recontracting becomes that much more difficult if you're not present, because you will not be able to catch the point where the client has moved away from what the contracted goal of the session was, and therefore recontracting becomes difficult. And of course, when you have created a strong presence, your client will feel heard, they will feel understood and supported, and that means that you have been able to create some amount of trust with them. In terms of competency 6, which is looking actively, again, it goes back to the same concept that if you want to be in a position to explore your client's words, their actions or emotions, then we need to be attentive at all times. We need to be able to catch those actions, those emotions, and those nonverbal cues. And therefore, your presence becomes a vanguard of how the coaching session is going. Similarly goes for evokes awareness. And the interesting one, and I think where I might get some contradictory views here, is facilitate client growth, because of all of the competencies, facilitating client growth is the one that is forward looking. It is the one that talks about what we have come to the session with, what we have explored in the session, and now what are we going to do about the session. So therefore, facilitate client growth doesn't seem to match with maintaining presence, because it is forward looking. But at the same time, if you have been present, you have the opportunity to indicate to the client whatever they have explored in the session. And if there needs to be a call out saying, we have made such actions, but we have made such plans, but we haven't had action, or there has been the way that the client has shown up for the session and is talking about their plans and goals, maintaining presence becomes key. I would just like to take a pause here in case anybody would like to share some thoughts. Sangamitra, that's a nice one. Presence is like a robe you have to wear before entering the conversation. Absolutely. Thank you. Any thoughts that anybody would like to share?
So, Neha, I was just thinking, contradictory to what you mentioned, where facilitates client growth could be something that is not necessarily something that promotes maintaining presence, right? I would just think that if you were to maintain presence, it makes you more open to allowing growth for the client. So, and the reason why I say that is I've just started off on the coaching journey. And as I think about how I want to work with my coaching skills, I find that providing value to a client is of my utmost importance. So for me, everything else is secondary. And this is just initial thoughts, right? So I was thinking that if a client has a goal, if a client has something that they want to achieve, my presence in the coaching conversation can either be a facilitator or it could be a hindrance. And therefore, I feel that maintaining presence could be a good way to facilitate client growth. So, yeah.
I'm in agreement with you. That's what I said, that it's a forward-looking competency, but you can only facilitate growth when you have been present and you indicate to the client anything that has shown up while the client is exploring and learning. So I'm completely in agreement with you. But the other way to look at it could also be that at the point in the conversation where you have reached facilitates client growth, the actions and if you were to look at facilitate as at competency 8 in its sub competencies, the focus is more on accountability. It's more on what we can create from going on. But yes, I'm completely in agreement with you. So which is why I go back to the statement that I started with, which is that competency 5 essentially becomes the base for us for any other competency to do well. So if you are able to do competency 5 well, understand how it works, and ensure that that always comes on top, then every other competency works better.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments that anybody would like to share? All right, so let's move on. Let's spend a little more time in understanding the sub-competencies of maintaining presence and how it has been charted, or how I would like to invite you to think about it, is that our clients are magicians. And when I say that, I don't mean that they're playing magic tricks to entertain us in the evening. Rather, what I'm trying to say is that there is so much going on, which can get missed if we do not have all our attention and focus and our thoughts entirely on the client. And I would just like to share a short video with you. It's a fun video to look at to kind of draw the analogy.
Now, this is a task for you to focus on. Now, you have your money in your front pocket here. Good. I'm not going to actually put my hand in your pocket. I'm not ready for that kind of commitment.
One time a guy had a hole in his pocket, and that was rather traumatizing for me. I was looking for his wallet, and he gave me his phone number. It was a big miscommunication. So let's do this simply. Squeeze your hand. Squeeze it tight. Do you feel the poker chip in your hand? Would you be surprised if I could take it out of your hand? Say yes. Good. Open your hand. Thank you very much. I'll cheat if you give me a chance. Make it harder for me. Just use your hand. Grab my wrist, but squeeze firm. Did you see it go? No. No, it's not here. Open your hand. See, while we're focused on the hand, it's sitting on your shoulder right now. Go ahead and take it off. Now, let's try that again. Hold your hand out flat. Open it up all the way. Put your hand up a little bit higher, but watch it.
You guys get the point, right? That's what it is. It's a sleight of mind or a sleight of hand, however you want to put it. And it's not necessarily something that is being done with intention, but it is something that will definitely happen. You will have opportunities in your sessions where the client is saying one thing, his body language might be saying something entirely different, and all the things that his body language and words are not saying, depending on who the client is and how you have got to know them, is going to say a third thing altogether. Any thoughts here? Do we agree, clients are magicians? No? Okay.
Just that they don't know it.
I'm so sorry.
I said just that they don't know it.
They don't know
way
it.
of doing it. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And we are to take the analogy of the video, we are actually the ones who are standing with our hands and a token in our hand and trying to figure out what's going on. But to delve deeper in maintaining presence, there are 4 components according to the PCC. According to the PCC markers, these are the 5 sub-competencies that exist for maintaining presence. Coach acts in response to the who of the person. Coach acts in response to the what of the person. Coach partners with the client by supporting the client to choose what happens in the session. Coach demonstrates curiosity to learn more about the client, and coach allows for silence, pause, and reflection. In my understanding, and I invite you to participate either through chat or if you have a question or a comment to make. In my understanding, it all starts here. So coach partners with the client by supporting the client to choose what happens in the session. This is contracting, right? And then your first job or your first bit about maintaining presence is to stay curious. A goal has been stated. Now let's stay curious to figure out what this goal is all about and how is it that we can arrive at clarity towards the goal by the end of the session. And from here, we might feel, or we might like to think that we are doing this, which is that we are acting in response to what the client wants to accomplish. Not we might, we are in effect doing this, which is to say we are acting in response to what they want to accomplish, and that this becomes the tool that we can use when we need to recontract, when we need to come back to saying, this is what we wanted to speak about today in the session, this is our goal, so let's align our thoughts according to this. But the outcome of this will almost always be unique, because this is always unique. So the who will drive what the outcome is. Now, if I was to take an example, procrastination is something that could be a very common theme that shows up in your client conversations, in your sessions. But the underlying reasons for why that procrastination exists and how people come up with their outcomes and clarity about how they want to address whatever procrastination is doing to them will always work from this. And so our understanding of who this person is, how they're responding to things, what is the context that they have given us, will always play a role in our outcome of this. And to ensure that this happens well, or to ensure that we get to understand this well, this becomes critical. Because the moment we allow for folks to think for themselves without asking too many questions, interjecting, or not giving them, or not giving them time to think, this is muddled. Then you are getting answers or responses that are more automatic and are not truly reflective of who the person is. So this is how I have understood and mapped how Maintains Presence works along this session and how it can help us. I would invite comments, thoughts at this point, if you have any, so that we can all understand something better. Okay, let's keep moving on. Now, I wanted to share a couple of examples of what presence could look like and what its absence could look like. I have chosen two 30-second clips of my sessions, and they're both with peer sessions from peer coaches from whom I have taken permission to show this. It is something that I have seen evolve in my journey, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the same. Sorry.
Been doing it from last 7-8 months, so I've done my bit to it. So maybe if you can help me, in sorting out a plan in terms of how I can go about it, and what all, maybe with your I don't know, there I would while we are discussing, maybe your experience and inputs can also help, you so
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd be happy to put in some information there. I mean, and obviously I'm, taking off my coaching hat and just kind of giving some suggestions here.
Okay.
Been doing it from last
Sorry.
7-8 months.
Does that look like presence? Any thoughts, ideas?
What I felt, Neha, it's me only. So, no, I think here, while the coachee was discussing, you said that, I'll be happy to share my suggestions.
Yeah.
Instantly, and which caught up my eye, and I thought that I'll bring it on here.
Yes, absolutely. Anything else that you guys noticed?
I would say a little bit around body language. I think that was a little bit, I would say, jarring.
Yes.
But that was one of the things. But you mentioned that you would be okay with sharing suggestions.
Yeah.
Sometimes you are in situations where your client is asking you for suggestions, right? And they also want to hear you say that, listen, okay, I'm here to help you. I wouldn't take that too seriously, is my point of view, at least after what I watched. Because to say that, okay, fine, I could definitely share my point of view with you. Maybe not immediately, but I will get to it. Because see, eventually when you are, when you do this in a professional setup, people also want to hear something from you. It may take away from the coaching process as such, but how we draw the fine line, I think, would be important. So, yeah.
Yeah. So this was an example of what presence does not look like. And I hear you, Sheena, in terms of saying that we would need to give suggestions. But if you're thinking about it from an assessment purpose, the moment you actually get into suggestions, you have switched off from being a coach and become a mentor. So while I have gone ahead and actually stated that, because that is something that we were also told in the beginning, that take off your coaching hat and then speak about mentor, because I think it's a question of practice and process. After a little while, it becomes easier to kind of steer away from such conversations. However, from an assessment perspective, and we are obviously talking about competencies from that perspective, the moment you start putting suggestions, it's not going to flow. Yeah, and you're right. You're absolutely right that you caught it on the body language. And aside from the obvious, I mean, obviously, I played this clip to speak about the fact that we started giving suggestions very early. I was very eager, as you can see, to give my suggestions to her in this point. And this was, I think, my third coaching recording ever in life. So obviously there was a lot of learning that needed to be done. But you caught it on right in the sense that, oh, I'm sorry, I think the image is not working, but essentially the body language, the setting, the hand gestures, the camera angle, the seating position, the fact that I'm tussling my hair, there was so much going on that would be jarring to someone and would kind of, there is no presence here, is how I would like to say. And now I would like to show you something that is a much improved version. Of course, there's always scope for improvement, but here is.
What I do? Thinking on it, I think.
So I hope that the message was clear in this. You don't need to say anything. And the times that we don't say anything is the time when people will actually come back with whatever. In fact, at the end of this like from the point when he said thinking on it was when he was able to come up with a reflection that had really nothing to do with me. I didn't really add any input there, but he was able to come up with a reflection which was completely different from what the conversation started with. Any other thoughts here? Any that anybody would like to add?
Certainly, Neha, in this video, more calm, composed, and I don't know, it felt like that you want to hear more from the coaching.
Yeah. A couple of things that I kind of identified for myself and then worked was, again, the setting, right? So compared to now, it looks like a more, finished setting than earlier. There's a lot of stuff going on, and for whatever reason, I don't know why. I mean, Rohit and I were having a great conversation, but I seem to have a big frown on my face, which also, when you look at it, would seem like, why is she angry? So in a situation where there is a paid client who's speaking to you, possibly for the first time and possibly for the second time, it's a new relationship that you're going in. You go in with a grumpy face, the person's obviously not interested in talking to you, right? So this was a different relationship. Rohit and I were comfortable with each other, and like I said, the conversation was going really, really well. But we also need to be cognizant of how we are present physically, how our physical environment looks like, in addition to what our mental state and how we're presenting ourselves. And so all of that comes into play. Would anybody like to share any thoughts? There's something on the chat. Coming out of the coaching stance. Yes, Rohit, I'm assuming this was for the one that Neha and I had, and I completely agree with you. That's exactly what happened. If any of you would like to say something and I'm missing it out, please also feel free to raise your hands, and then we can have a conversation around it. Anyhow, let's move forward. This was, like I said, neutral face and background. And now let's spend some time talking about how we can use maintaining presence as a tool and actually direct it towards our clients and understand from two aspects. One, is it missing in them, and is it causing areas where where the lack of their being present in the situation or being mindful of what's happening is creating conflict or opportunities for improvement. And the second one would be how we as coaches can provide them with tools which help with or use the idea of maintaining presence to help them think further. So to talk about the first one, which is when clients need to cultivate presence, now there can be many more opportunities, but some of the examples that I wanted to share would be overwhelmed professionals, where the idea that the person brings to you is that there is just so much happening. I cannot focus on anything. I'm too tired at all times. I don't know what is going on. That's a classic case of them not being able to present with what they're working with today. And they're worried about what has happened in the past, and they're worried about what's going to happen in the future instead of what's happening right now. That is another way for us to look at maintaining presence. Similarly, disconnected relationships, stressed parents. If any of you here are looking at life coaching as the niche that you want to cultivate, then in a parenting situation, so many times it might happen that the parent is stressed from work, or is there but is not actually present for the conversation that the child is having, and therefore they're not really spending any, when we try to say spending quality time, because they're not present for it. And therefore we can, we as coaches in our conversations can point these things out. Unfulfilled individuals, folks who are struggling creatively, they're not able to figure out what their next creative moves should be. Performance anxiety, folks who suffer from stage anxiety, suffer from how their performance is going at work. Folks who are not able to focus on setting their goals, folks, and from a group coaching perspective, teams that are experiencing strained workplace dynamics. So what I mean by that is that a team of folks are working together. Your boss and you have a strained relationship. Now your boss might actually come back with a really great example or a really great suggestion, but that strained relationship of what's happened in the past and what you expect to happen in the future is taking you away from being present for that situation and simply understanding or realizing the quality of the suggestion for what it is. And that's creating even more strain in your workplace dynamic. Chronic health issues. We are so concerned about what's going to happen to our health that we are not able to just take a moment and work on our health and our fitness today. So those are areas that you could identify that may come up in your coaching conversations, where being present is something that not only you practice as a coach, but you can also identify that as something that your clients need to do. And once we have identified, the ways that we can kind of break it down is to say, what are the barriers? Why is it that you cannot, that you're not able to just look at the situation in its individuality, and everything else seems tied together. Identify the triggers that create these stressful situations for them, that take them away from being present for the conversation that they're having. Explore the impact. So going back to the analogy or the example that I gave for boss versus subordinate situation. Now the subordinate is simply, or the boss is simply not willing to look at the suggestion or look at what the idea has been proposed. And therefore the impact is that the work efficiency and efficacy of work gets affected, simply because nobody is just being present in the situation. You can use it to highlight patterns. This is what generally, I have seen that this happens multiple times. I have observed this pattern emerged in our conversations. You can, of course, use it for reflective inquiry. Let's just take a moment and think about what we're talking about today. Why is this important today? Let's come back to what we were talking about and how can we use our conversation or our exploration today. We can use it to create action plans. We can find practical applications of it. What would happen if you were just to simply look at situations for what they are today? What would happen if you're simply present for the conversation and spending your time and energy being focused on the other person and not thinking about yourself? How would things change? You can introduce some mindfulness practices for them, something as simple as breathing. And a great book, which folks in ACC would have already gone through, Positive Psychology by Shazad Jamin, talks so wonderfully about the mindful practice and the simple tool that you can use instead of it being a drawn out, find time to meditate sort of process. And those are tools that we can obviously share with our clients and celebrate progress. Whatever little has been achieved needs to be appreciated and celebrated at all times. So those were some of the thoughts that I had around how we can help. Would anybody like to Thanks, Harsh. Thank you. He's already dropped off. Would anybody have any thoughts, questions, ideas? Okay. So this brings us to the last element of the session, which is how does competency 5 look in every level, from an ACC and MCC to a PCC. And so this is a very broad stroke comparison. It's not, I haven't gone very deep into it, but essentially what we're trying to say at all times is that from an assessment point of view, at the ACC level, we are expected to show a basic level of presence with occasional distraction. A little bit of loss of focus is okay, but obviously, please consider this as a broad stroke comparison and do definitely use your mentoring conversations to understand whether your recordings will pass through for the assessment or not. But from the competencies, what we can understand is that at ACC level, it is the basic level of presence. At PCC, the presence needs to be more consistent. It needs to be more grounded and attentive. And at MCC level, we are expecting the masters to have more advanced presence, a more deep connection. And I think this is where the statements or the conversations around the person, having the person in the room is enough for everybody else to respond differently. That's what hopefully we're all working towards, and we will be able to achieve soon enough. This recording and this deck would be available at Abhyudya's YouTube channel. So please feel free to go back and refer to it if this was in any way helpful to you. And I would just like to say, let's keep the water clear. So thank you so much for all of you to have joined and participated in this session. If you have any more questions for me, I would be happy to answer at this point. Thanks, Rohit. All right. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. Yeah, Neha, go ahead.
I'll quickly have a question. While you have researched, and thank you so much for a beautiful presentation and connecting a lot. I was also thinking that when you showed that slide that maintaining presence in the middle, I was like, no, let me just challenge her. And I was thinking, but I couldn't find it. So amazing way to present it, and it'll definitely register in our mind. What I want to know from you, because you've done on this competency, is as a coach, what can we do to master this competency?
So my answer to that would be twofold. The first one is, of course, we have to keep thinking about the fact that my thoughts, my emotions, or my external stimuli, let's keep it as neutral as possible at all times. And all of us go through this, right, Neha? And we have both been together in our journey at the same time. It takes time for us to come to a certain level of focus and attention in a session. But what that does tell us at all points is that if we have traveled this much, then we have within ourselves to travel farther. And I think that's what it is. Mastery is all about practice. Our experience will only make us better. And I would then invite you to just go back to this, to always keep in mind as to why we're doing this, right? If we want to improve our capability at every subcompetency, they're all connected. And if we understand how they're connected, then we can see how our response in a certain situation will have a domino effect on all competencies.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, let me just give 30 seconds if anybody else has any comments to make. Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you, Priyanka. All right. Thank you so much, folks. We kept it within the 45 minutes. I'm happy that we did a great tight session. I would love to hear from you. I'm available on the Abhivya community in case any of you would like to reach out and have a chat. And see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.